So tonight, let's get on with the agenda. So what we want to do is explain through narrative. We want to explain all the different infrastructure elements, starting with the planning board. And Andy Wandell will take us through elements of the master plan, but also, what the plans are beyond. Then we will turn to Bill Chenard, who will talk us through the road plan. We have Dan Sullivan, the water superintendent, who will talk us through the water plan. So already within three topics, the two hot topics, water and roads, are getting covered. And then we're grateful to have the vice chair of the ZBA, Chris McGrail, who will share some of the zoning rules and laws. And then we have an empty spot for Jimmy Bristol. Jimmy Bristol's a big developer in town, doing two rather large projects that are important. He's also at a golf tournament right now, so we're hoping we see him with a trophy later. But we'll slow boat through to Jimmy's round, as he's probably doing on the 19th hole right now. And then finally, we're you got it. We're very grateful to Peter Foreman, who is the chairman of the South Shore Chamber, and he is going to share some of the experiences of our neighboring towns. So, Andy, are you ready?
No.
Okay.
But I'll start.
I'll put somebody else's slides up if you wish. But
No.
okay.
My name is Andy Wandell. I'm chair of the planning board, and just wanted to say it's great to be in this building. It's a long time coming. We did a lot of work to get here, and it's just the result is pretty stunning. So really glad to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about planning board, talk a little bit about the master plan. Planning board, if you don't know already, the things that we deal with on the planning board are typically zoning bylaws. So we shepherd the zoning bylaws through the process. We're also responsible for any site plan review, so any change of use on a property, we have to oversee the site plan. We also oversee new subdivisions, new housing, things like that. So you don't usually get a chance to hear about a lot of the new projects in town until we have a public hearing. So it's good to get in front of people up front and let them know what's going on in town. So the master plan. This master plan is 2024. The last master plan was 20 years ago in 2004, and before that, 1971. So we had a pretty big gap in master plan. I was on the master plan committee in 2004. We instituted a lot of the things in that master plan, one of which is the Center Protection District, a couple of other things that came out of that master plan as well. We had a great group of people work on the master plan with us, the Master Plan Collaboration Committee. I see a lot of the folks who are on that committee in the room today. They did a great job putting together the plan and working with VHB to put it all together. We accepted the plan a couple of months ago at the planning board. We didn't appoint a specific implementation team for that. We felt that the planning board should be responsible for shepherding the master plan and overseeing the master plan. So we will continue to do that. And we do have some things that we're looking at, specifically having to do with zoning bylaws based on the master plan that came out of 2024. So some of the interesting things about the master plan is, believe it or not, open space increased by 30% in Pembroke over the 20-year gap between 2004 and 2024, which means that a third of our town is in open space. Now, as you may know, Residence A is the primary zoning, the zone in Pembroke, and that makes up roughly 80% of all of the available land use. So taking 33% of that land use into open space really limits the amount of land that's left for residential. That means we're pretty close to build out. Other couple of interesting notes is business use actually decreased, and this is land use. So business use actually decreased by approximately 2% in that 20-year period, and residential use was very modest, between 4 and 5%. So again, we're very close to build out. And if you take a look at the available land for residential use, we're at about plus or minus 400 acres. And then if you consider infrastructure and wetlands and some of the other constraints on residential development, it's probably a lot less than that 400 acres. So the key takeaways is we may have to take a look at some other ways to zone what's left to get a bit more density or modest density in the land that's available for residential. And housing growth is economic growth, as we all know, that provides great jobs, but also provides housing, which is an important thing. We're in the middle of a severe housing shortage. I think everyone knows that prices are way, way up. And one of the only ways to overcome that is through more inventory. So if we can get more inventory, and that's not just us that need to do that, our surrounding towns need to participate in that as well. So again, zoning will need to be reassessed to allow for efficient use of the remaining available land. So I thought I'd go over a couple of the business zones in town, just to give you an idea of where they are and what's allowed in them. We've got the residential commercial district. This is Washington Street from Barker Street to the Duxbury line. The uses there include medical, professional, retail, light industry, personal services. You'll see a nice mix of residential and commercial in the residential commercial district, hence the name. But one interesting factor here is multi-unit dwellings are allowed by special permit up to 4 units per acre. Now, an interesting fact is that we haven't seen a new subdivision come before the board for at least 5 or 6 years. So the single family home subdivision is we're getting less and less of them, probably because of the constraints of land use. And the only real projects that we've had for new housing have been all along the Route 53 corridor. So you'll see them at Congress Street and Washington Street. You'll see them next to Dairy Twist. You'll see them across from Dairy Twist. So that housing is very much in desire. So people like single family zoning. However, with people aging in these large homes and subdivisions, they'd like to have an option of a home where they don't need to take care of everything. And that would free up their home in a subdivision to a younger family who may want to come in and start a family in Pembroke. So that kind of housing, I think, is in great demand everywhere throughout the Commonwealth, especially here in the South Shore. So the other business zones are Business A. And if you're not familiar, that's Mattakesa Street to the Rotary, and then in Bryantville Center. And Business A allows all uses allowed by right in the residential commercial district. Also allows gas stations, auto repair and sales, nursing homes and restaurants by special permit. And single family residential is allowed, but no mixed use. So you can't have commercial and residential on the same use on the same property. But you can have a single family residential home. And that is zoned just like Residence A, 150 feet of frontage and 40,000 square foot. Business B is the 139 Washington Street intersection and all of Scusa Street and Church Street to the Marshfield line. That also includes where the Christmas tree shop was. That allows all uses allowed in residential commercial district in A with different dimensional requirements for frontage and lot size. And single family residents are allowed in that and no mixed use. So next we go to industrial districts A and B. So that's Corporate Park, Pembroke Woods, Riverside Drive, where a lot of our businesses are located. We allow health and medical, business financial, light industry, hotels and a convention center, assisted living, and office buildings not to exceed 4 stories in height. Now, a couple of years ago, we did a housing production plan where we found that the amount of housing or affordable housing, not low income, but affordable housing available to folks in the service industries, teachers, firefighters, is very hard to come by in Pembroke. So we decided to allow residential multifamily housing in the industrial districts A and B. And that multifamily housing was allowed by special permit. So I know it's very controversial to talk about the MBTA adjacent zoning, but we were ready for it. So we had to make very little changes to our existing zoning to actually pass the MBTA adjacent communities law. We just had to change it from going from special permit to by right. And if you look at that area of town, we already have significant multifamily housing there. So Pembroke Woods is 230 units on 50 acres. There was a second phase of that was proposed years and years ago that would have doubled the amount of units on that 50-acre site. That's pretty much textbook of what the MBTA communities law is. And there's 2 overlay districts, and this is kind of funny because it's really kind of a sign of the times, right? So before there was the recreational marijuana passed in Massachusetts, there was medical marijuana allowed. So we decided to zone for that. That's allowed in the industrial district A and B in the area west of Route 3. And then years and years ago, if you didn't zone for adult usage, so strip clubs, adult bookstores, things like that, it could prop up anywhere in town. So you had to designate an area for it. And that designation is industrial A and B zones east of Route 3. And then finally, the Center Protection District, which is Center Street up to Mountain Ave, Mattakesa Street up to Grove Street. We at one time allowed mixed use there, but we were getting projects in front of us that were either residential or commercial. Actually, we got very few commercial applications in the Center Protection District. Almost all of them were residential. So we did change that again. We've gone back to either you do residential or you do commercial in the Center Protection District. That's something I think we want to take a look at again, especially with some changes that are going on in the center of town. For instance, the fire station won't be there anymore because we have a great new public safety building coming up. So that property will have to be considered. We have 2 gas stations that are kind of grandfathered in. They can't make any changes because that use is no longer allowed in the Center Protection District. So every time they come to us to do a whole new site plan, we tell them that they're not allowed to do that. So they've remained exactly the same as they've been for years and years and years because of that. So I think a comprehensive look at the Center Protection District, some of the needs, some of the things that are attractive to the town is going to be warranted. Other things that that we're looking at, future issues, just saw the Housing Act passed. A big piece of that is accessory dwelling units by right. So now you need to go to the ZBA to get permission for accessory dwelling units. We do allow them, but you have to have a blood relative go into that accessory dwelling unit. That's no longer the case with the state law. We also required 800 square feet, up to 800 square feet of additional space. The new law allows up to 900 square foot of additional space, and the law that we had on the books, or the bylaw we had on the books, only allowed for attached, not detached. And so the new law allows for detached units of up to 900 square feet. Still a lot of questions out there about that. You know, what's considered the livable space? How do you account for parking? But we will have to pass an accessory dwelling unit bylaw that's in conformity with the state law sooner rather than later, actually. And then the other things we want to look at is what I like to call moderate density. A lot of folks are a little alarmed at the MBTA law because it requires a minimum of 15 units per acre in density. So that's pretty high density. Right now we have very low density housing with single family zoning. That's what I would call low density. But I think it's time that we look at, with the remaining, so little remaining land left, we look at moderate density zoning. So for example, a lot of the surrounding towns allow for a half-acre lot with 100 foot of frontage. So that could get us more density in Residence A. And again, since we're pretty close to build out, you wouldn't see a lot of that housing happening, but it's certainly something that we should consider. And again, through the public hearing process, that would play itself out. So you'd get plenty of opportunity to come to the planning board, talk about it. We'd hold public hearings before we go to town meeting to get any zoning bylaws changed. So that's about it.
But making that change, Andy, you're still only, because you've only got 400 acres, that's only 800 additional units, correct?
Well, again, 400 acres is not going to get you 400 units of housing.
Right.
All right.
No, I understand.
Yeah, because of the infrastructure and everything else. No, but it would double what you would be able to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Very good. We do have a lot of questions for Andy. They're coming up once the whole panel's had an opportunity to make their presentations. Let's move on to zoning. We only have one slide on zoning, and I actually wanted to share with everyone. This is from a Massachusetts website, and it's just making the point that our zoning laws can be overridden by developers if we are under 10% of 40B. And we have to be aware of that. We have things forced on us if we're under 10%. Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that's right. How you doing? Chris McGrail, Vice Chair, Pembroke Zoning Board. Fraser is 100% right. So when I first come on, maybe like 4 years ago, I sat at the library for the River Marsh hearing. An absorbent amount of units over on just the other side of Water Street, also known as on the North River. The only registered scenic waterway in the state of Massachusetts. And I was, against it for so many reasons. They wanted to put a wastewater treatment center on the North River, which I don't know if anybody's ever been down there or fished it or hiked it or kayaked it. It's amazing. And I was dead set against this project, right? And as well was one of the other members on the board, Arthur Boyle, and we voted it down, right, for so many reasons. And everybody in the back of the room that was all lived on Water Street and Cross Street, and they were fighting. They were full of fight, So how am I going to tell these people no? You can't fight this fight for So we voted it down. But what happens when it's voted down? Then it goes before the Housing Commission, right? And then the Housing Commission, under the current administration, pretty much says, here you go, you can do whatever you want. So I'm not saying our hands are tied, by the state for a lot of reasons. Yes, we need, there is a crunch on land. There is, people need places to go, but it's such a, I don't know, I look at the internet. I don't really partake too much on the internet other than just like reading, see what's going on in town. There's just a bunch of haters throwing rocks at the zoning board needs to shut this down. The zoning board needs to shut this down. No, we don't. Like you need to go to the polls, vote, and take part in your government, other than just throwing rocks at people that think they can change something that really can't, because our hands are tied on a state level. So I just had it pains me every time I look at it. It's like I didn't do anything. I just get up this morning to go to work and try to earn, for my family. It's not a paid position. There is no kickbacks. I'm not a rich politician. Neither is anybody else that sits on the board with me. It's just. It's infuriating. So I'm for 40B. And that's one thing we have to, I don't like anybody stepping on my toes either. Like my land is my land. I bought it. I want to do what I want with it. I want my neighbors to do what they want with it within reason, because I want things my way, right? So that's why everybody gets mad about 40Bs. Plain Street's a new one. But another thing to remember is we need to get in the driver's seat. So it being under 10% is where it gives the developers the pretty much carte blanche to do what they wish, where they wish. So currently, Andy, what are we at, 8.7, 8.5?
Well, we're a bit higher than that. And when permits are pulled for the two projects one has not been approved by ZBA, but the other has, we'll be closer, but as we add housing units over time, we kind of take a step back. So I think we're at around 9.8. Once we get the new units in, closer to 10, we'll have to do the calculation again, see where we are.
And what happens, which Andy had made privilege to me, was so River Marsh got voted down, and then it went to housing court, and then they got whatever they wanted. They got approval. They're going to go ahead with the project whenever Brian Murphy and River Marsh LLC goes forward with it. We don't get credit for that percentage until they get their occupancy permit. So that's the same look I had. Across the street at Shepherd's, because it passed when the building permits are pulled, we get credit for that percentage. So everybody's like, well, all these 40Bs going through, where are the numbers? Why haven't the numbers changed? Well, that's why. So once the Shepherd's permits are pulled, we'll get credit for those. Once River Marsh gets built or whatever and they get their occupancy permits, we'll get those. But at the same time, there's other development happening in town. So the more development, the more affordable housing you need. It's like, I eat because I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because I eat. Like it's a never-ending cycle. But either way, so I just wanted to touch on that real quick. See if I have anything else. Anything else, Fraser? No.
No, I think Bill wants to.
Sure.
Throw his hand in.
So the moral of the story is find developers who are willing to work with the town, such as the gentleman next to me, and get to 10%. Get our housing, get to 10%, but get it in a manner that we want.
Yeah.
So
Because we can still approve a 40B if it's 10%, you know, so we're right on the cusp. Like, oh crap, well, you know, somebody's going to build a subdivision over here. You know, there's this 40B that we like. Maybe we can work with this guy, you know, guy, developer, woman, whatever, to keep ourselves in the driver's seat. Because right now we're just along for the ride.
Great, thank
all
you. Moving on to Mr. Bristol. Jim, I'll put your slide up here just so that you can. I left the picture on there just in case you didn't show up. But
I wore the same outfit, so you'd recognize
That
it.
looks like it was
terrific. Appreciate it.
He's why you lost.
So, Jimmy, if you just want to introduce yourself, and,
Sure.
and there's a lot on that slide.
Yeah.
But then after that, if it's all the same with you, I've actually got the Matakeesit Village and the golf club. So if you could just give us some words
Sure.
on that as well, so the residents of Pembroke understand your role, what's going on, but also the fact that the numbers that we're talking about, when the Matakeesit Village goes through, there'll be other developments that knock those numbers down that you're doing as well. So, you know, people have to be aware of, as Chris said, the give and take. But anyhow, the floor is yours, Jim.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. I recognize some of you out there from our permit process in Pembroke over the last 4 or 5 years between the Country Club and Matakeesit Street, the old Shepherd's Funeral Home across the street. We have had the fortunate experience of developing something that is a rare win-win. Typically, when you're in front of a town trying to permit anything, we get stuff thrown at us, and it started that way when we first came in with Pembroke Country Club. It was not the most comforting crowd, and we worked to educate folks that what we're trying to do is save the golf course, propose a housing component that the town really doesn't have, a 55 and over community that mimics what we did up in Weymouth and we're doing in other communities on the South Shore. That is a huge tax generator for the town and a relatively low traffic impact, relatively low sewer water impact, and generally, once it's built, it's a great asset for the town and saves the golf course. So the golf course will be able to do a new restaurant, new function facility, make improvements to the buildings on site, make improvements to the golf course, and that's all only doable because of the housing component that gets permitted. So we had several folks that were selectmen, planning board members, conservation folks that came up and toured what we were doing in Weymouth, and once they sat there and saw the way it operated, we almost got a unanimous vote at town meeting. And the first meeting I was at, I had people behind me going, "Go back to Weymouth." So it came a long way in a very short period of time, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. One of the biggest delays we've had wasn't so much the town, but we wanted to go out, make sure we could save the 18-hole golf course, and so we had some neighbors approach us that had land, and we approached other neighbors so that we kind of exhausted what the potential of the project overall could be. So we went from 169 acres to 244 acres. So that allowed us to keep an 18-hole golf course that will be just as long and hopefully a higher quality when we get done. Anybody that's played Pembroke Country Club that I know has always loved it. Some complain that it's long. We'll introduce some forward tees to be a little friendlier to older folks and younger folks and ladies, and so that everybody enjoys the experience there. It's a beautiful piece of property. One of the nicest properties I've ever worked on. So
I'm going to jump to that slide, Jimmy.
sure.
You're talking about it. This is the plan, the overview of what you're talking about, correct?
Yeah. So the majority of the housing comes through the center of the site. The maintenance building is up off of Dwelly Street. The main entrance will be where it exists today off of West Elm. The three buildings that you see off of the parking lot. One is the big Augusta building that exists today that will be where we charge the carts. There'll be some event suites there. So when folks have a golf tournament or a wedding function, something at the function facility, people will be able to stay overnight there. So that's kind of a neat thing that got added to the design. The center building is where the current restaurant is, and that one we're planning to tear down and build a new restaurant on the first level and function facility up on the second floor. And then the third bigger building that you see there is an 8-unit, which the zoning allowed some multifamily units. So it's 162 single-family detached homes in that one 8-unit building just off the parking lot. The new driving range is the white that you see down at the bottom of the screen. There's probably 3 or 4 holes that get redone. There's probably 5 or 6 that get new tee boxes and that kind of thing. But there's probably about 13 holes that we won't even touch. So other than to make improvements with cart path, bunkers, etc., that kind of thing. So there's some housing off of Hazelwood. That'll be a separate community with an emergency through. It won't be a separate community. It'll still be part of the 55 and over, but it will be accessed off of Hazelwood. We had some pushback there during the permit process. There was formerly a single-family subdivision that would have been regular homes that was approved in that area. That was a greater density. It was actually, I think, 21 house lots that got approved back in, I want to say, 2012. It was quite a while ago. But so this should be a lesser traffic impact to that neighborhood. And then there's another single access property over off of Dwelly up in the top right of the plan. I think that's about it for Pembroke Country Club. We're hoping right now, permit wise, we're 100% done with the town. Planning board special permit, order of conditions with the Conservation Commission. The two things that are holding us up right now are at the state level. There's a MEPA process where they kind of globally look at everything. That's probably got another 3 to 6 months. And the package treatment plant for the septic, which will go under the parking lot, is about another 6 months. We got the preliminary approvals with DEP and working on designs for the final. And that's about 46,000 gallons, the 23,000 new that is the housing. And then there's about 23 that the restaurant function hall and those facilities will generate. That's kind of a repurpose of the existing structures.
Let's talk about Matakisa Village.
So as part of the permit process and the zoning that we received at the country club, the affordable component could be built on site at the country club. It could be built off-site elsewhere in Pembroke, or some sort of payment in lieu. So during the permit process and the assembly of the acreage over at the country club, we had the opportunity to look at this site, the Shepherd Funeral Home. A broker called us about it, and we said, geez, that might be a good spot to do an off-site friendly 40B where the town gets to count all 66 units towards the 10% threshold that you've heard folks discuss this evening. And that's what we ended up doing. It's also age restricted, so it's predominantly just 1-bedroom homes, apartments basically. And we introduced a tavern as we were going through the process. We shrunk the units a little bit because of construction costs and interest rates where they've gone since we started. They were 4%. As we're going through it, they're 8 and 9%. So it becomes a little bit more difficult to pencil to the banks. So we shrunk the units a little bit, changed it to 3 buildings where it was 2 buildings initially. And we added a tavern because we kind of looked around downtown Pembroke and said, geez, where are our residents going to eat? There's really nothing right downtown. So it was well received by the board, and we're excited to partner with, we work with Will O'Connell's my partner, manages Granite Links up in Quincy. He runs the Weather Vane Tavern for us in Weymouth. He runs the Range Bar and Grill for us in Hingham. So he's excited about doing this one as well as the stuff at the country club. So we've got a good team there that has a lot of experience, and we're excited about both projects. This one, we're just green lighted the architect and the structural guys on the plans, so that we should be able to file for foundation permits and subsequently building permits this fall, winter, and get this one rolling, because I'm glad to hear that it counts once the building permit is issued.
That's what I was told.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
Yeah, so that's great news for the town.
Not so much for the other.
But right. And we're talking to a few potential partners on that that have built that type of product. It's a little bit new to us, but if we have to build it ourselves, we will. And we think it'll be a win-win and great addition to the downtown area. And hopefully we see you all at the tavern at some point.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Jimmy.
Yep.
I think what's left is Peter Foreman. Peter, I'm just going to talk through this slide before you come in talking about our neighbors, because I pulled some figures for us just to look at how we stand in the county of Plymouth. So when we look at the house sales in 2024 and the house sales in compared with 2023, and obviously we haven't finished all of 2024, and I know we have some realtors in the room that have already debated with me the validity of how I've expressed this, but basically the share of Pembroke's housing sales. So in 2023, 489 homes were sold, and that gave us a share of something like 3.6% of the county. Right now, with 151 sales, we are down below 3%. There's an 18% drop in our share of the county. And I've just put all the other towns within the state. Hanover obviously is inflated by the fact that there is that big development where the mall was. But when we look at, so that's the home sales, 489 to 151. The average prices, however, in Pembroke, they're up 631,000 is the average price of a home in Pembroke, up 4.5%. Pre-COVID, 2019, we were 430,000. So that's a 46.5% jump in the value of homes. But we're still not, the average for the county is still high, much, much higher than that. And the county has grown by 8%. So I don't have a conclusion or a statement to make about that. These are just the facts. So I'm presenting the facts. and then handing over to Peter. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not quite sure what to make out of all that, because that would be existing home sales. New
Correct.
construction.
I think they're combined because they're deeds from the county, so it's a combination.
This is data taken from the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
So it'll be all.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me. The South Shore Chamber of Commerce, if you're not familiar with it, is a regional chamber of commerce. We view about 25 communities as being part of a economic region, and in addition to obviously serving the member businesses, we look at where we think the South Shore is with our economy and how it's going to grow, and where the business community might help lead it. About 8 years ago, we did a deep dive looking at the region and found that the regional economy, and therefore our municipalities, were facing some big problems with economic competitiveness compared to the rest of the state in the Metro Boston area. And the biggest threat we saw were our demographics. We were older and aging faster than the rest of metropolitan Boston, which presents a problem when you're thinking about who is going to be here to fill jobs, who is going to be here to attract companies as a workforce, who's going to be able to service us all, who grew up here or are going to die here with no workforce. And we found the answer to that was really about housing. And when we talk about housing, we got behind an agenda of trying to promote a lot more housing on the South Shore. It's important to think about what housing means. We did not look at it primarily as shelter the way most people did. And we didn't really look at it in terms of cost because any new construction is expensive. What we looked at is the housing product. And most of the South Shore, we found, is very rich in large lot, single family detached homes, the very traditional homes that we're all used to and love and don't want to see changed. And a lot of that is because of the way towns have zoned. And that zoning was, in many cases, used to prohibit any growth, particularly on the South Shore, because we had so much growth during the urban exodus, Boston flight back in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of towns, for many reasons, started having a lot of zoning restrictions. And so what we see is we have a housing product that predominantly conforms to anti-growth zoning and not housing product that conforms to what the market is looking for. And by the market, I don't mean developers looking to cash in and make a buck. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's what people are looking for. And the people we looked at most carefully, or particularly at, were two groups: the downsizing baby boomers, those of us who bought the 3 or built the 3-4 bedroom homes, empty nesters. What are they looking to downsize to? And then the younger people out of Boston, who we hope will be the typical move: come to Boston for college. It's great when you're in your 20s, and then you want to move out. Where do you look for? And they're looking for something very similar. They're looking for more compact housing, smaller maintenance, smaller houses, looking for houses or homes near activities, interesting areas, amenities. And that's why we got on this push of trying to change zoning and supporting particular types of housing products in the area. And those are mostly multi-family housing or small detached compact housing like we're going to see at the golf course. And housing that is used as an economic development strategy in itself. And that means using it as mixed use, trying to have housing so that you can have some commercial development nearby, not necessarily or always in the same building, but nearby. So getting that, something near transit in many cases, because that helps draw people down. Housing that's used to help communities with placemaking, because what people are looking for are communities where they are kind of interesting. Not everybody wants to live on an old developed farm with nothing around it. I happen to like it, but not everybody does. And so we're trying to get that housing that helps keep the downsizers, those people who have been made their lives here, been successful, who are rich in talent, even if they're retired. They've got a lot of talent and expertise. And then those younger people. And that placemaking for towns, helps attract people. And the towns need to be attracting people, particularly now. The post-COVID huge federal state aid to municipalities is coming to an end. And towns are going to have a harder time, I think, looking to manage their affairs. Not necessarily manage growth. The growth is going to help pay for some of that. Because the equation has changed from, I used to be in the legislature back in the 80s. The equation's changed with housing. Housing used to be a cost burden on communities because most of us were thinking of 3 or 4 kids. Nobody's thinking of 3 or 4 kids anymore. It's 1 or 2. People aren't having families the way we used to as a society. And so what we find is the old housing, which might have impacted local services, now it doesn't bring as many children with it. There aren't as much impact, and they tend to be, the larger developments tend to be net tax gains for municipalities. So that's a good thing. We're seeing 3 kinds of towns in the South Shore, and I think probably statewide. There are towns that are using housing as part of their own economic development strategy, doing something like the downtown project here, which normally I would like. I don't like what the Brookfields are doing on Matakeesit because the Shepherd Funeral Home, J.J. Shepherd, was my great-grandfather. And I don't know why that land didn't come down to the family. I don't know how it ended up getting out of there. He should have passed it down to us. So I'm checking with my mother on that. But it's a beautiful project, and it's a way to find out. It's a way to develop a center and bring in more amenities and services. Even though Stop and Shop is closing, the fact that you're going to have more people there, and the fact that you have something interesting like the new community center and the library, it's a beautiful. It's got all the great ingredients to help with local development. But those towns that are moving forward, thinking about how they use housing as a strategy, or as Chris said, getting in the driver's seat. Sometimes it's a defensive strategy. They want to have the friendly 40Bs or whatever and have more control over what may happen with proposals in other parts of a town that they might not want. Those towns are doing well, and they're pretty smart. Then there are some towns that are trying to promote some of this. They have legitimate issues, usually around water, wastewater capacity. And that's a real concern. We have candidates here and local officials. Even as much as we promoted housing, we have had conversations with the governor and the administration that things like the MBTA law, we get the principle of it, but they have to understand that many suburban communities have legitimate water, wastewater issues, and they can't be looking to have the suburbs use housing, even if they want to, if they can't get some of that infrastructure help. And the administration's aware of that. That's a legitimate issue. Those towns are trying to break through, get some housing, do it. But they need some help and are being stymied a little bit. And then there's the third group, and that's the towns that are trying to duck it completely, mostly putting their heads in the sand, thinking that the future of their town is no change, no growth. And that's actually a way a town declines. towns when you don't have any change or growth. And they're gonna try to buck state law and state trends. And what they're gonna end up finding is they're gonna probably get housing anyway. It's just not gonna be the kind of housing they might want, and it may not be in the location they want, and it may not be used and integrated into a town master plan the way they had hoped. And they're gonna end up losing in the long run. But those are the three towns we see generally around the state, of the three types of towns. And we've seen some great progress on how towns are using this for economic development. Hanover, with Hanover Crossing, helping revive a ghost town mall. Kingston, with the Kingston Collection, introducing housing there, same purpose. It's reinventing property and activity to help drive commercial activity. So lots of great examples around the South Shore of towns that are doing the right thing, towns that are hoping that this housing crisis is going to go away, and towns that are using housing in very different strategies. And Pembroke's doing a great job. I was fascinated. I've never heard a town manager have so much detail about road construction. And what's really interesting in that, other than you must have a really boring life, what's interesting is most town managers have incredible detailed knowledge about their town departments. Road work is construction. And I think one of the problems we have is so many people in local government don't have an appreciation and a deep understanding of the cost of development and what happens when you delay things and drag it out for years unnecessarily and go to court, and what that does to the cost of housing. Not so much the cost of commercial development, because what happens is commercial developers say, out of here, there are other towns that want us. We're not going to sit around and litigate with you forever over commercial development and increase the cost of that exponentially. We'll go elsewhere. And housing development's a little different. People will stick around and can force it on you, but again, with the wrong results. So kudos to you to having that kind of understanding of the cost of development. Certainly as it relates to roads. And my guess is you probably have that in relation to other physical development as well. So,
Tell the
so
truth,
that's great.
Bill.
But you're doing a great job. So keep it up.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. We're going to move on to question time. We're actually on schedule, give or take 4 minutes. We're going to have the questions that have been proposed to us by the residents. I've put them into category order, so Dan's going to go first. I will probably not. The town folk will see the questions that have been asked, but I think most of them have been answered. So we'll rattle through these fairly quickly. And if we have time at the end, we'll open it up to the audience that's here present. I know one or two of you have already spoken to me and they've got questions that you didn't get emailed in time. But before I do that, I do want to thank the panelists for attending tonight. There was a lot of work put into the presentations prior to tonight, and I think it shows. And I'm very grateful for you all coming on behalf of the town and the chamber. I'm also very grateful for a full house of select board members here tonight, so appreciate you all showing up. Thank you. If I can turn some of the questions on to you, I will. We've also got some state representatives here, so we're grateful for you attending, and good luck in your races. So we've got questions on town planning. I'm going to throw these to you, Bill, but there's other people in the room that can answer these questions. Infrastructure is designed to accommodate what population capacity? This is a great question, actually. I think I asked it.
So we are planning on our major roads. Some of our roadways we cannot expand capacity for population. We just don't have the roadway width, the right of way to be able to do that. We would be purchasing your land to make that happen. On the bigger projects such as Route 36, and Route 14 before that, and some of the other roadways that we have done as a community, we're building those to current specifications, which really, other than for passage of cars and the number of cars that pass over that road, it's an unlimited capacity. It's only limited by the ability of the number of cars that transition through there. We're putting in the light cycles where we need the light cycles. We're putting in traffic circles where we need those, the intersections. We are complying with the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, otherwise known as MUTCD, which does restrict. I know there's been some frustration on some of the intersections. Instead of coming straight out on 36, it bends. Those are all federal requirements that we have to comply with, which does limit the transition time somewhat, but we are planning for maximum capacity.
Another question here. Based on the town's expectation of development and growth over the next 5 to 10 years, when do you expect our infrastructure to exceed its life? We've got a lot of infrastructure planning going on. I mean, this building is a new building. We've got the public safety building, which is on track, John? On track. That'll be coming online. There are other infrastructure projects.
So there are a number of infrastructure projects that are in the planning stages. Most of them are very, very small. Public safety, obviously, this building we just opened up, we're looking at a 50-year useful life. And we're planning for, as we spoke last night at the select board meeting, planning for expansion within the community, allowing for that space to have extra storage capacity for equipment, for staff, so that we plan ahead based upon what the anticipated population growths are over the next 20 years.
Thank you. I think you've answered that. That's what projections have been made to determine our infrastructure that will need to be repaired or replaced.
So some of that isn't based on population growth, though. I mean, we're starting, and I don't want to speak because it's not my lane, so to speak, for the schools. But obviously, the schools are planning some things, and that's not population growth, but it's based on technology and needs that are changing dramatically. Or if you look at where we were 10 years ago for technology, we're teaching different technology and different things that the schools are likely going to be bringing forward over the next several years that we need to start planning for. We're talking about that today on a couple of things, which I won't get into this evening, but we need to think about that, and we need to plan for that, and we want to make sure that we're including that in our long-term capital planning.
And I'll just slip in a quick ad. We will be hosting an education forum. So those questions will be answered in the education forum. Hot topic. I don't think anyone can answer this just yet. What's the expected cost and plan to cover these replacements and repairs?
Well, we can't answer it fully because not all of that is there, but we do have within our capital planning about $18.6 million worth of infrastructure improvements over the next 5 years.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask, so that's going to be my next question. So how much is it going to cost? How is it going to be funded?
So it's funded a number of different ways. Some of it is we talked about funding for roadways. There are similar funding for some of those projects. Some of those projects will be funded within the levy. Some of those projects will be funded by free cash. Some of those projects will be funded by grants. There's two that I can think of I won't discuss tonight, but certainly in the next several months we'll be hearing about those. The board will be getting presentations on those. The library trustees will be getting presentations on one of those. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of funding sources. A couple of those will likely have to be approved by the voters. They're big enough where we would need to do a debt exclusion.
Well, I have to say thank you so much for attending tonight. Thank you to Local Scene for all that you do. This is the first broadcast from this facility. There's lots of wire involved, and Dustin and Dan have done a fantastic job. We've been here 3 times testing it, and they've been here. They've done a great job. So forget local scene, Dan and Dustin. Big props. I also, I've got a thank you screen. Oh, I'm wasting my words. I also want to thank Lance and his team here. This is a magnificent facility. It really is a gem in Pembroke, and we've just got to make good use of it. And Lance is doing a terrific job. There are a lot of questions for you, Lance. I'm not going to put you through them tonight. I know you are. You're very approachable. I'll send you an email and we'll try and get something distributed to everybody. So that's it for tonight. Thank you again to the panel. Very informative. And thank you for attending. Good night.